Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. It is May 25th, and today's webinar is Buying Your Home 101, presented by Marie Bonville. My name is Alyssa Atkins, and I am the Training and Development Coordinator for the Native Learning Center, and today I will be your webinar facilitator. A quick disclaimer, this webinar provides a summary of fundamental concepts, requirements, and/or procedures within the allotted 90 minutes. The material discussed does not illustrate all possible scenarios that could be applicable, and today's webinar is also being recorded. Before we get started, I want to familiarize you with some of the features available and how the environment works. If you look at the top of your screen, you will see an icon of either a person with their hand raised or just a hand. With that icon, you can either raise hand, agree, disagree, or step away. Now your screen should look similar to the graphic here. To the bottom left, you will see a box that says Files. Here you will find today's presentation. Please feel free to download a copy for yourself. Simply click the item you would like to download, then click the arrow pointing downwards, and you will be prompted to save or print the materials based on your device's permissions. The second box that states Web Links to houses today's survey, as well as any other links that are found throughout the presentation. Lastly, to the right of the screen, we have a chat box available. This is how you will communicate to the instructor and NLC staff. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to interact by using the chat box. Simply type your message and hit enter, or click that up arrow icon button to submit. All tech support issues should also be submitted here. And it is with a great pleasure that I now introduce Marie Bonville. She will be the webinar subject matter expert today.
Thank you, Alyssa. I really appreciate it. If you could put the share screen, I'll go ahead and start that. Awesome. Thank you. Alrighty. So welcome everyone. Thank you to the NLC for that introduction. As Alyssa said, there's a lot to cover in today's webinar. And to get to everything, certainly the slides to the presentation will be available where you can check out my bio and some other things. But let's just jump right in. Today, we're going to be talking about home ownership, specifically the buying process, and what you would have to go through in order to purchase a home. Now, I don't know how many of you are in the hunt currently searching for a home, or whether or not these are more housing professionals. So if you want to go ahead and put your name and where you work in the chat area, if you're with a TDHE or a housing authority, then that'll help me tailor kind of what I want to say to you all in regards to the process. So feel free to do that. Also, I love the fact that in the chat area, you'll get to see if there's anyone like you in a different area that has the same title, and then you guys can work together, because in each area, I know that the real estate itself might be a little different, your processes might be different, but maybe there's something you can learn from each other as far as the process goes. So again, put your name, where you're located, and your title in the chat area. And I'll try to check the chat area every so often. I built in question moments for this particular presentation, so you have an opportunity to ask questions as well. So the home buying process, it's difficult. It's not an easy process. There are ways to avoid confusion, and that's through education. So it's really important that if your homeowners aren't going through a home ownership program or some sort of education and training, that this gives them that opportunity. Typically, those classes are much longer than 90 minutes. You're looking at, I've done as much as 3 classes, 3 days, 8 hours each day. I've also done, 2 hours a day, 12 times for the week. And so thank you for putting that information in the chat area. This process includes evaluating both the types of home loans that are available to them, right? So there's not just one product. Banks have many different products that our clients can choose from. Of course, we're going to talk about Section 184, but there are others. Also selecting, right? If you're off reservation, then you're selecting a real estate agent, your loan officer, there's inspectors and appraisers, there's all these people in the process. So it's really important that we give them a good jump towards getting ready, essentially. So saving, spending, debt to income. Those are the three main things we want to make sure your clients walk away from today. That they're not alone, right? That there's a lot of other professionals in this process, and that you as the counselor may not want to solicit any one particular company or person, but you also know that there are partners in the process, and that the process will go much smoother if you have a preferred list of lenders, right? So you can give them 3 options and then let them choose. And then also from that contract to close, right? What happens after, if you're off reservation, you put in an offer, or you're on reservation and someone accepts your offer, or what happens when you've selected your manufactured home and it's being delivered to the site, right? There are all these other elements that are involved that they need to know about. So the 2 primary native-centric trainings that are available for homeownership, the first one is solely dedicated to homeownership. It's Pathways Home. That's provided by NAHC. And the other is Building Native Communities, and that's produced by OESTA. And so those 2, typically as housing counselors, you get certified in these trainings, and that's what you use to facilitate this workshop. Now, it's not one size fits all. There's a lot of information in each book, and I typically go between the 2 of them. And then as a practitioner, I also have to make sure I have all the skills necessary, and things do change, right? You can't produce books every year. That would be very costly to these organizations. So we're thankful that they have a native-centric training, but I also need to make sure that as interest rates rise and as other things happen within the market, that I can be prepared to serve my clients by knowing what's going on. So for example, duty to serve is something that the FHFA, right, the Federal Housing Finance Agency, along with Freddie and Fannie, after 2008, there was this real push towards making sure that we made homeownership equitable. And what does that mean? It means bringing all the stakeholders together and basically saying, what's your duty to serve certain communities, and do what? Increase manufactured housing, because typically on the reservation, manufactured housing is much more prevalent than any other sort of or type of housing structure. And then you also have this commitment to rural areas, low, very low, moderate income areas where there just isn't enough housing, and that could be lack of infrastructure as well. But how can we work together to get there, right? These organizations have a duty to serve. And so Credit Smart Coach is one of those tools. I'm currently in the spring facilitators session, so I don't have the certification just yet, but I wanted to remind everyone that opportunity will be available in the fall. So I'm taking it now, and I'm learning so much more. It's very similar to Pathways Home and to OESTA's certification, but it does have this technological benefit in that it can be downloaded as an app, and there's a lot of PDFs and things like that, which just makes it easier to give to your clients. So these are the kind of things that you will go over in the class itself, and then also in working with your clients and what they'll have access to. So today's home buying agenda, or the typical home buying agenda, starts with healthy spending habits. We go into money management. How did your parents and your grandparents, utilize money? We talk about spending and saving, right? What are your habits? What are your, do you have a budget? Do you like the word budget? What are those spending habits that you currently have now that need to change in order to purchase a home? We talk a little bit about banking, and specifically for this webinar, I'm going to talk about identity theft. Native American communities are typically underbanked and underserved. CDFIs are helping to change that. However, I do feel that we have to have a good basis for folks to be able to go to their lender and get proper financing. So we need to make sure, if they're not currently banked, that they're doing that. They're going to get a checkings and a savings account, so that way they'll have that established prior to going for a home loan. Then we've got credit, right? We've got to talk about credit reports and credit repair. It's not as, I would say it was pretty much a myth as to all the different ways you can improve your credit. in the past, right? There was no real understanding of how it worked. And FICO, along with the credit bureaus, have done a better job of kind of describing what credit is and how it can be used and how it can improve, because that's the real element to this we want our clients to avoid, right? We don't want anybody spending money on fixing their credit. Oftentimes that's predatory in nature. We don't want other people in their credit report and credit, in their personal information like that. So I do think it's important to protect that by understanding how credit works and where to properly get access to it. Of course, we have to talk about mortgages and the types of loans that are out there. We also have to talk about eligibility, right? How do I qualify for a home loan? It's not, we want to protect our clients, right? So if you Google that, you're not going to necessarily get the types of individuals we want them to work with as housing professionals. I think, we kind of want to make sure that they're looking at all their options, but they're also not getting misinformation, or they're not getting in contact with individuals that are going to continue to solicit them. You find people will Google something or maybe check out a house on Zillow, and now they've got tons of emails and tons of texts from housing professionals, real estate agents, and now they're just turned off by the process. So typically I show them Monopoly and we talk about, what is this game about? What's the purpose of Monopoly? And of course the purpose is to, purchase as many properties as you can, right? But the other element to Monopoly is that it's changed. It's changed over time. Monopoly has a very interesting element of being, a game of passion, right? The more homes you buy or more property you buy, you start to get excited. There's this exchange of money. And typically in the past, it's been done by paper. But as you can see here, they move towards the electronic banking and having credit cards, because that's where we are as a society. But you can make credit mistakes, and that typically is one of those things that we're talking about in class. So this is a good way to kind of transition from piece to piece. We have to talk about the housing itself as a market, because they're going to be in a dynamic where they have a certain interest rate, where there may not be homes available. The supply is very low in most cases, and or they're having to purchase homes, manufactured homes, and navigate those prices. They have to select materials. So knowing more about what's going on with the market is going to be helpful to them. Then also too, in 2008, there was the crash. Most people remember that, right? That's the most recent. And it was so housing centric. It had so much to do with housing that people remember it, but they may not know all the specifics. So what I like to tell them is the benefit. They don't need to know everything there is to know about the Great Recession, but what they do need to know is that the benefit of the Great Recession was all the consumer education that comes out of it. People need to know what they're signing. They need to know what their interest rates are. There needs to be no confusion as to the fees, the closing costs, etc. So your closing disclosures, your loan estimates, these things are essential, and they come directly out of the legislation and the impact that the 2008 recession had on people. Most folks got into homes they couldn't afford because they were excited for the process, right? Monopoly, buying money, buying property. They were excited for that fact, but they didn't have the knowledge to go with it. So it's really important that they understand that, so that when you talk about the future, when you talk about home ownership for them, what does it look like? The average person purchasing a home right now is about 33, 34 years old. And so they're much more informed than individuals in the past. In years past, individuals would kind of just go to a counselor, housing counselor, a TDHE, and say, I think I want to buy a house. What do I need to do? Now they can go to YouTube, TikTok. They can pretty much find the information online. But specific to native housing, it's going to be very different. There's going to be a lot of things they're not familiar with, terms, conditions, people in the process that they're not familiar with. So I think that, knowing that ahead of time, I come to the presentation with some of the things that I have to debunk, right? And the first thing is this: everybody's been watching HGTV. On the reservation or off the reservation, this is what they think homeownership looks like. Whether we like to admit it or not, they're looking at, they think they're going to look at 3 houses and make a decision. They think that the home is going to be completely ready to move in, or that it you know, if they have to make some renovations, that the professionals that they need will be readily available. And that's not always the case. In most communities, tribal communities, finding certified, qualified housing professionals to do renovations is difficult, or it's costly, or both. And so I think that, you know, we have to talk about the fact that it's not going to be exactly like this. What it's going to look like is, it's not a straight line. It's going to have its ups and downs. I won't go into all these little details, but as you can see here, it's definitely a process, and there's a lot of information that they need to know along the way. Do you give it to them all at once? I think you have to be careful. You don't want to discourage anyone from home ownership, but I think it's important to kind of evaluate your clients as they come in and say, okay, well, you know, what do we need to do first, second, and third? So here's a video of exactly that. This is Native Homeownership is Possible. And I like to show this video at the beginning of my training sessions to talk, so they can see that there are individuals who have had to think through the same things that they're going to have to make decisions on in the coming weeks.
I've always just wanted a house ever since I was a kid. I didn't really grow up having homes. You just rent these little places and they never feel like home. They're small and they don't really have anything new in them. So I've always wanted a home. You have to just kind of make up your mind that if you want to be a homeowner, then you have to make some sacrifices and long commitments.
At first, I was a little intimidated, you know, just because it's my first time of getting out there and whatnot. But I kind of got over the fear and decided to take it in my own hands and just do what I can to provide for my family. I grew up kind of in a struggle, like, I guess, no bedrooms, no running water. So we kind of grew up tough, and that's kind of, you know, made me who I am today.
I was 28 years old. I didn't know what owning a home was like, really. I just wanted a quiet neighborhood to move into to raise children. And we needed a place that they could call home.
We're raising a little guy who's 3 years old. Our little girl is 10. They're going to inherit the land. They're going to inherit whatever we build out here. So it's going to be here for them.
It's a 4-bedroom, 2-bath, very big living room and kitchen. It's pretty big for us.
We have a 1957 old house. It's like ranch style. It's really nice. And it's in Timberlake, South Dakota. It's on 2 lots, 1,800 square feet, beautiful yard, big garage.
The advantage of it is I got a place to call home.
So you get to make improvements on it, and you get to have guests over and not worry about things breaking down.
Yeah, it's ours. And we can do whatever we want to with it. If we want an addition, we can have an addition.
You can save up and plan ahead a little bit better than what you could do in a renting situation. For a 1-bedroom apartment, I was paying $600, and then you still have to pay utilities on top of that, and I didn't own it. When I'm paying now on my house, $700 a month, including property taxes and insurance and things like that. So it's such a better deal to know that you're investing in something versus just kind of throwing your money into something else that you will never own.
In the end, it's a long process, but it's worth it. Rewarding, and you have your home for your family. But deep down, I still feel great because we own a home.
Just go for it. Be courageous.
You're going to end up loving it once you get your own home.
It's worth it. Just go in and see what options are available to you.
So that's the kind of presentation that I like to do in the beginning for my clients, so that they can hear from other individuals within their area. And if you don't already have a video like this in your community, I would suggest making one. Of course, you can always invite homeowners, your current homeowners, to classes, but what I find is that life gets in the way and they get busy with things. And so it might be helpful to, if you haven't already, think about interviewing your homeowners and ask them what homeownership means to them, because that's what's going to be most have the most impact on your clients, especially when it starts to get hard, right? When you start to get all these applications in, and sometimes they're simultaneous, right? It's not just the loan application or the credit reports that you're pulling, or the utilities and the easements and the things that have to come from land management, or maybe IHS is involved and there's water and there's sewer. There's all these applications, and then it gets overwhelming for folks. So that's why I think to simplify matters, we start with saving and spending. We talk about that first. We give them some hope and show them individuals in their community that have been able to get it done. And let them know they started in this exact same spot. All those individuals have to start with, what am I spending every month? What am I saving every month? And can I make some adjustments? To do that, they have to know their needs versus their wants. They also have to know what's in their background, right? As much as we like to say, oh, I'll never be like my mom in this way, or I'll never be like my dad in this way. We grow up with some money habits that stem from our family. And so we have to talk about these things. This particular section comes from Pathways Home. So I encourage you, if you're not certified, to get certified in that. But then from the other element of Pathways Home, I switched that up. Not Pathways Home, from OESTA, is this idea of fixed and flexible spending. I have to know what I'm spending each month, or I'm not going to be able to make a proper decision. I have to know what is the same each month. Is it my rent, my car payments, my loan payments, insurance? These things don't change month to month. Typically, they remain the same. So I know that's kind of like the box I have to work with. But then there are other expenses that I have each month, things that I can maybe adjust, right? Groceries, utilities, gas, ceremonial costs, right? Maybe I choose to go to different events or not to go at all this year because it's going to cost me more. So I have to think about these things. You have to evaluate your needs versus wants, and you do it through fixed, flexible, and luxury, knowing what each section holds for you. Now, I know for some people, they'll say, well, I'm sorry, but Netflix is a luxury. You don't need it. You don't need it. You don't need Disney Plus. This is true for some families, and for some families, it's very important, right? It's maybe the only entertainment they have for miles and miles. And so for them, that $6.99 a month is essential. We can't, as practitioners, decide for them, but I think that we can have some conversations that bring out what's most important. A lot of times we're dealing with families, and it's not just a marital situation where it's two partners, but oftentimes we got to let everybody else in the family know that we're going through the homeownership process as well. Why? Because you can use homeownership to your advantage. You can say, look, I would love to borrow. I would love to let you borrow some money this month, but I can't because I'm saving for homeownership. Or for the kids, a lot of times the kids don't understand what's going on. And it's like, well, why can't I get some money on Fortnite? Because we are saving for homeownership. Why can't we eat out this Friday? Because we're saving for homeownership. These are great life lessons that we can instill and give to our families, so they feel empowered to do what needs to be done. They need to be tracking, assessing, taking action, and saving when it comes to a spending plan. A lot of folks are afraid of spending plans or budgets. They're like, oh, I don't want to, it's so complicated. But the reality is, if you don't know where your money's going, you'll never know where it went. People get their income tax each year and they're like, wow, that's how much money I made. They have no clue because they're not telling their money where to go each month. The other element to this I wanted to bring up is online banking. A lot of times people are doing paperless statements. And here's the thing with that. You're not checking it. I mean, if I'm honest, nobody's checking their banking statements anymore. They pretty much say each month you get a notification that your statement's ready, but you never check it. These are the kind of things that our clients are going to have to start doing in order for them to adjust. So a spending plan is just simply taking the time to track your income and your expenses, and then also estimate for yourself, how much am I going to have to spend this week? And then go from each week to each month to a plan for the year. Does that make sense? The other thing is, you want to ask some common budget questions, like, is my budget reflecting my priorities? When I look at my statement, what do I see? When I look at my plans, do they make sense? Are my needs really wants? Where can I cut back? And what do I pay off first? I'm going to address what do I pay off first in a little bit, but I do want you to know that there's a list of budget templates at the end of the presentation. And so you'll be able to use that with your clients, because here's the thing. Some folks are tech savvy and they want to use calculators online. I'm hesitant to let them Google it on their own. I like to give them the tools because I know which ones are going to not try to sell them things, if that makes sense. So like, for example, ADP is a payroll company. So they have a few calculators on their website. To me, that's safer. Unless they're starting a small business or something like that, there's no other need to calculate income. And so they're not going to sell them on anything else. But there's pros and cons to paper and pen versus online. And so here you can see the laundry list of why paper and pen sometimes works for folks. Typically, when you write down a goal, you see it through. But with online apps, it's so convenient, right? It evaluates things. So I also have 10 mobile apps to manage your money, and that link will be at the end of the presentation as well. So here you can see an app within their actual bank. That's one thing I wanted to mention. Most banks realized that they needed to do a better job at helping folks with financial wellness. So there's tons of free information that's available through their banking, their local bank, whichever bank they use. And then 2, I like the fact that it's all within one place, right? Your bank already has your information. They already have your spending habits. When a bank calls you and says, hey, this looks fraudulent, why do you think that is? Because they already know how to evaluate. They've been evaluating what you've been spending this entire time. So you might as well use it to your advantage, right? So as you can see here, this person shows a total amount of spending for the year, and then also to specifically what they're spending their money on. So home and utilities, transportation, groceries, personal care, restaurants and dining, shopping and entertainment. All of these things can be broken down the same way they can in a budget template. Trends. The neat thing about this one is that it automatically aggregates, well, okay, why are you spending more in November? What's in November that's got you spending so much more than other months? That's one way of looking at it. And then you can adjust. If you don't know, and this is the thing about bank statements, because typically I have, in this particular area, this is where I would have individuals pull their bank statements, request to start getting them physically by paper so that they can start to evaluate it. But I'll ask, what needs to change? What are you seeing? Are you seeing trips to Starbucks or to Dunkin' Donuts or whatever the local coffee shop is, or maybe it's 7-Eleven, or maybe the local convenience store? Those drinks are probably twice as much as you would pay for if you were to purchase it at the grocery store, or make your own coffee at home, right? So you can't make changes if you don't know, and if you don't know, you need to start with pulling the bank statements. The other thing is paying yourself first. So definitely I advise individuals, look, everybody wants a piece of the pie. And so you're going to have your expenses. I'm not telling anyone or advising anyone not to pay their bills. But if you don't put any money away for savings, then when there's an emergency, you're more likely to use either payday advances or other sort of financial instruments that are not going to be as good for the client, right? Not as good for them. So we want to make sure that they understand that savings is essential. I don't think I realized this until I was in my mid to late 20s. I'd never saved, when I was younger. I just thought it was a luxury, and it really is essential to what you're making each month. So always put some monies away for a rainy day. So when I get a flat tire, rather than using my credit card, I can actually just pay for that cash. So you want to make sure that the goals that they set for themselves are smart. What do I mean by that? That they're specific, right? They're all in the home ownership process. They're all going to want to purchase a home, but can they be more specific? In the next 6 months, I want to save $750. I want to reduce my spending, right? I want to evaluate my apps. That could be the first step, but it's specific. It's measurable. I know exactly how many apps I have. And in my case, I don't. Between myself, my kids, my husband, you can't imagine how much money is being funneled out of this account without me even knowing each month. So these are the kind of things you want it to be specific. You want it to be measurable. Is it achievable? Certainly, yes. I think within 6 months, I can delete 6 unnecessary expenses from my account. It could be a gym membership. It could be, it could be the purchase of coffee here and there. I can eliminate some apps that are charging me monthly for services. And what else can I do? Maybe I take lunch instead of buying lunch, and that's another way I can achieve my goal. It's realistic, right? I'm not saying that, a lot of times think about diets and how sometimes we diet or at the beginning of the year when we have our New Year's resolutions, we make goals that are not necessarily realistic. With home ownership, it could be the same way. Folks are in the class, but they're not being realistic. They're not willing to make any changes to their ability to save. One way to be realistic is to involve everyone in the homeownership process. I can't stress it enough. This is a family decision. And in our communities, it's not just with the 4 or 5 individuals in the household. It's grandma, it's cousins, it's everybody in between. So we need everybody to be aware of the goal, so that we can be timely about it. What do I mean by timely? Homeownership, as we'll see, the market changes. Where we were a year ago with interest rates, they're now higher, right? So if you can create a timeline for yourself and start being timely with your goals, you'll start to see those goals get accomplished more frequently. So I talk about that, and we end on the fact that budgets aren't set in stone. A lot of people feel like, well, I failed this month. I didn't meet my goal. Budgets are meant to be reviewed often. You're supposed to take it and look at it, define what needs to change, organize yourself. Maybe you shouldn't be using your check card as much, right? A lot of times that there's a physical connection to money that we have when we spend it, and use cash. Show of hands so I make sure everybody's still awake. How many of you still use cash for your everyday transactions? You can put it in the chat area for me. Shantae Moore says very rarely, right? So that's the truth, is that most folks are not using cash as much. And so there's no physical relationship to swiping your card, right? You might not even be sure how much you have in there. And then it's true, Belinda, that more and more places aren't accepting cash, which is very scary, because I think the younger generations are going to need these types of trainings even more in terms of what's safe to use and what's not, right? Because online, everybody wants to capture your information. Everybody wants you using your check card for online transactions, but what's safe, what's not. When you use cash, you have more control in that way. So yeah, I think that we need to look at it from the perspective of, how do I organize myself? I know a lot of folks, they've got several different credit cards and they don't know what's going on either one. They've got several checking accounts and they don't know what's going on in either one. So assessing your needs and then executing them all is determined by creating a budget and sticking with it. Now, if there's an issue with the budget and it doesn't work this month, the need to beat ourselves up is something that, it's really important that our clients feel empowered. And I feel like with financial wellness in particular, it's an emotional thing. We'll talk about financial trauma a little bit here, because I think that when we're having these conversations with them, excuse me, I'm just trying to make sure I get to the next slide, that we talk about how they've had negative experiences in the past, specifically when it comes to credit. A lot of people say, you know what, I messed with credit when I was younger and I'll never do it again. And so there's this negative feeling that comes with credit and financial wellness in general. I know some folks that when it comes to math, they have math anxiety and will not touch numbers, even though it's going to benefit them in the long run, right? So we've got to do some counseling, some financial coaching to get them where they need to be. So the first step is credit, right? We talk about their saving and their spending habits, and now we need to talk about credit, right? What credit is and the fact that you use it in exchange for a promise to repay. And you think it's further out than it really is. It's something that's being reported on. Your habits are being reported. How often you pay your debts are being reported. And these are the three main credit reporting agencies. As you can see, Equifax is in Atlanta, Experian is in Costa Mesa, California, TransUnion in Chicago. And that was really to cover the spread. So a lot of times they're referred to as the nationwide or NCRCs. What you need to know about these credit bureaus is that they don't all report the same information. So the other element is that the lenders are also involved in this, right? The financial institutions, those banks that we work with each and every day, they're businesses, and businesses sell products. So credit cards, personal loans, car loans, these are all products. When I talk to my clients, I let them know you are going to be offered products. Typically, when you're at the grocery store, you evaluate products. You decide, this brand is selling for this amount. This brand is selling for this amount. Which one will I choose? With credit, it has to be the same way. They have to have the same set of lenses when they make those decisions. So, of course, there's different types of credit, and we make sure our clients are familiar with installment, revolving, and open. What does that mean? Installment essentially just means that you're making the same monthly payment, and then at the end of that loan, you will have paid it off. And then the other element is revolving, right? This idea that I'm going to pay down a credit card. Let's say I have $1,000 credit limit and I charge something for $500. Well, there's $500 left for me to spend in available credit if I need it. However, when it comes down to it, if I pay that $500 off, I still have $1,000 left to be able to use at a later date. So that's revolving. It's constantly available for you should you need it. And then lastly, open. Typically, it's trade lines. So maybe and if you're in an agricultural setting, you've got a feed store. Within 30 days, you need to pay something back, but you're able to purchase the item within that store, and it's considered open, available to you to use. So Belinda says Dave Ramsey recommends cash as well because studies show that spending hurts. And it's true. It's very true that physically seeing it, feeling it, being a part of it, you sense that level of pain that's there when you spend it. When we use debit cards, it doesn't have the same effect. And that is the reason why, I asked them to do a little 7-day challenge, right? Pull out cash, see how long that can last. You really start to see how much you overspend when you have an unlimited access to capital, when you're in the grocery store. You wouldn't spend as much as you normally would if you had to use cash. So I totally agree with Dave on that. So going back to the credit scores, we have to talk about FICO and what the score itself means, right? So FICO is the Fair Isaac's company, and essentially think of it as a picture, right? They take a picture of your habits when it comes to credit each and every month, multiple times within the month. They're looking at your spending habits. They're looking at whether you've paid cards down. I mean, it is amazing how much information is being reported and how quickly it can update. So it's a prediction of how likely you are to pay bills, and that number is anywhere between 300 and 850, and it drives the decision that these lenders will make in regards to credit. Now, the 5 C's of credit, and all of this will be in those in the curriculum in both books, is that you start with character, and that's your credit history. That's how often do you pay your bills on time, right? 30, 60, 90 days late, and so forth. So all your credit cards, all your loans will have that information. Repayment sources, right? Capacity. That is, do you have the ability to repay this loan? That's your employment. That information will be also on your credit report. Not how much it'll also say how long you've been at a company. It'll have that information, but it'll also show sometimes, it'll ask you to recalculate. Do you have any new, income? And it's doing that to be able to show that this makes sense. Repayment here makes sense. They're going to be able to make this loan payment. Conditions that affect your repayment. You want to make sure that you're able to prove, like, for example, a lot of times within a divorce situation, you'll have folks that weren't aware that they had credit cards, right? Their spouse opened something up in their name and they weren't familiar with it, or they thought she was paying it, he thought he was paying it, and so on. So it's really important that the conditions itself that affect repayment, like paying your bills on time, like making sure you're gainfully employed, that you have these things to be able to show the ability to repay. Capital. This is typically your down payment, right? In the case of homeownership, you're able to say, I can put 3% down, 10% down, 20% down on a home. And then collateral, this is just your personal item. Let's say you have something of value. Think of a car itself. If you pay that car off, you still have it. It belongs to you. And so in that way, it's guaranteeing that you can repay should you use that. Think about secured credit cards. A lot of folks, once they have gone down the road of having negative credit, they go ahead and they get a secured card, which I do recommend for individuals who are in that situation. So what will happen is they've got $500 in collateral. That is money that they have that they can use, and they can give it to the bank and say, hey, I'd like a $500 credit card, and I'll put my $500 as collateral. And in return, after showing that they're able to pay, that the other elements of the 5 C's are met, typically that money is returned to them. The banks will go ahead and give them back their $500 and say, we see that you're able to handle credit and we're willing to make this a regular credit card. So going back to the chat real quick, Jessica says, it's totally true for some, like my other half. He's not good with credit cards. I tell him he gets swipe happy. And that is the thing, is that with credit, a lot of times we see the immediate benefit. And that's just the nature of, I think, where we are as consumers, is that there's the immediate gratification that we're seeking when we purchase things using our credit, and we think we'll just deal with it later. Well, later shows up. And so that's the hard part, is that it's always around the corner. And you're only 30 days away, right, from that statement coming into the house. So when it comes to credit score, here are the things I want you to remember, that they are looking at how you pay your bills, right? So that means, are you late? Are you on time? 30 days. A lot of people get right up to it. Like, I'm talking 29, 30. They're just at that, I need to make that payment, and I'm 29 days late. Well, if you happen to mess up, life gets in the way, and now you're 30 days late, and that's going to show up on your credit report. So you don't want anybody, trying to get close to that. I tell people, just because they give you 15 days grace doesn't mean you should take it, or 10 days grace doesn't mean you should take it, because they will report you after being 30 days late. The amount of money you owe and the amount of available credit. This is super important. So one of the things, going back to the different types of credit, if you have a revolving account, for example, let's go back to that $1,000. If I owe $999, that's pretty close. That is a signal to the creditors that I'm living on the edge, right? I am one missed payment or late missed payment, or maybe even, if a life situation happens and I can't make that payment, I could end up with not. And then the other thing is, I could end up with a late payment fee and an over the limit fee, right? So banks are businesses, and businesses sell products. They know that I could be late, and now I owe them even more money in terms of the fees that are associated. Length of credit history. So this is one, sometimes it's counterintuitive, right? Some folks say, look, I'm done with credit. I closed all my credit cards and I saw my credit score go down. Why is that? Now I only have one credit card. I thought I was doing a good thing. The length of credit history does have an impact on your score. So if you've had credit cards that are longer, a lot of times I'll say, don't close them. Just, you're not going to use them anymore. Let's make sure we talk to the lender before we make any decisions regarding the closing of cards, right? So that's just kind of like how I handle that, because it is kind of touchy. Some people say, look, I don't want to use this card anymore. I've never wanted to use this card. I'm kind of ready to cancel it. That's a personal decision. However, know that it will have an effect on your credit. The other thing is when it comes to the length of history, I've actually had a home that I sold, and just in my head, I thought surely I just paid off this huge, large debt, that this was going to have a positive impact. But because of the length of history, it was actually one of the longest running loans that I had on my credit that I lost a few points as a result. And so I had to realize, I talk about this every day and it happened to me. So just know that sometimes it's counterintuitive, right? It may feel like it's wrong, but it's actually the right decision to hold off on closing your account. So Shantae Moore says, is it true that business credit accounts don't affect your personal credit score? And so it depends on the type of credit that you've applied for. If you're going from the personal perspective and using a personal credit card for business purposes, then yes, that's going to affect your credit. I know some individuals don't have an LLC yet, so they don't have the ability to get a business credit card. However, a business credit card, if it's going through the Duns and Bradstreet model, then yes, that is not going to affect your credit. However, there are some companies that link the two. So it just depends on the type of application, the loan itself that you're applying for. Let's see here. Mix of credit. As I said before, there's 3 types: installment and revolving, and trade. So just going back and forth between the two. If you only have, when you're younger, I should say, you don't have any credit. And so not having any credit oftentimes means you don't have a mix of credit. Or you have one credit card and then you have one car loan. Well, then you just have the 2. If you were to get rid of one, then you don't have that mix of credit. So that's what that's explaining. And then new credit applications. This one just means that, we've got to be careful with how many times we apply for credit. There is a snapshot, like banks aren't understand that if you're shopping for a car loan, you're shopping for a home loan, that you might need a isolated period of time. So they typically give you 15 to 20 days where this won't affect your credit in the bigger picture. And it'll just drop it by a few points. So of course, this is kind of like the standard, what's poor credit, what's fair credit. I let my clients know wherever they are now, they can improve their credit. When you're purchasing a home loan, the main thing to note is that your credit score can always improve. It can't get worse, right? We don't mind. Hey, that financial picture can always get better. It just can't get any worse, right? You can't make any, new financial decisions without communicating with your lender. So, for example, are they pulling their credit report? Right now, due to the pandemic and everything else, it used to be that you could only pull it once a year. Now you're able to pull it once a week through the annualcreditreport.com website. Now, what actions hurt your credit score? And the other thing is, I know I've got several CDFIs and other institutions in the room. If you have that ability to pull credit reports, then that's a good thing for our clients as well. They don't have to go through the process of doing it themselves. Going back to, them using the wrong site or Googling it and then ending up paying for it when they shouldn't have. It's really important that if you have those sort of services, that you're including that as well as an option. So what actions hurt credit scores? Missing payments for sure. Credit cards being at the capacity limit, as I mentioned. Closing those cards that you have that are longstanding, going back to that credit history, shopping for credit excessively, opening different or in a short period of time, right? So it's not just that you've purchased, they're not looking at the individual purchase itself, but they're looking at whether or not you're balancing your credit and how much you owe on each credit card, right? Or each loan. They're looking at those balances. And they actually, if you go on your credit report, you'll see, okay, she's got a $5,000 credit limit, but she's never passed that $1,500 mark, which is just, it goes to show you how much information they're collecting. having more revolving credit compared to installment, and that's that mix of credit. So how long do things last? That information is here as well. Improving your credit score, because I want to make sure I get through everything. These are the kind of things you can do to make sure you're improving your credit score, paying off the debt, getting current and staying current. A lot of folks struggle with credit cards. So the one way is, and this is actually something that I think the Dave Ramsey model is on here as well. But this one says pay off. No, this is the Dave Ramsey model. This says pay everything off first, right? It says you've got these small credit cards with $200. Go ahead and pay that first. $500, get that early win. Feel good about paying things off regardless of the interest rate. You might say, well, okay, well, interest rates cost the borrower over time. Shouldn't I start with the highest interest rate? Dave Ramsey and others have said that, in the end, you're only buying yourself a couple months, but what you get is motivation out of an early win. So this is paying off your debts, your smaller debts first. The next one is a debt snowball, and that's essentially, the traditional method, which is looking at your highest to lowest interest rate and deciding on which one makes more sense, right? So you start with your highest. Maybe that's a store card. Typically, store cards are anywhere between 29 and 30%. So you might want to start there, pay those off, and then move into those others. And as you have the additional money, right, you start to see the savings from not having to pay high interest rates and finance charges on that. Then you can go ahead and use that for other debt. So that's the debt snowball method. And then there's also the debt avalanche. And this one is more so, especially when it comes to mortgages, this essentially just says you're making 2 payments each month instead of 1, and it'll make sure that over time it's faster and reduces the amount of interest you owe on the home. But as I said before, we want them to be able to absorb financial shock without breaking personally, professionally, spiritually. These are the kind of things that they're coming to the classes with: guilt, frustration, anger, hopelessness, anxiety for sure over the future, and whether or not it's a good time to purchase a home. So we want to make sure that we tackle avoidance by making sure they bring their bank statements, that they're checking their accounts, that they're evaluating how much they're spending. And then that way we can also talk about how to protect themselves. So real quick, I don't have a whole lot of time because I want to make sure I tackle both the mortgage payments itself and the lending process. But protecting your down payment. Most people, their down payments are in their checking accounts, not their savings account, their checking account. Scams, right? Individuals are checking emails, scanning emails for keywords like wire fraud. So what does wire fraud mean? Wire fraud is typically most banks, when you're in the process of purchasing a home, that your down payment is going to be asked, or your closing costs are going to be, they're going to ask you to wire those funds. So they scan for the keyword wire, and then they send you a fraudulent email saying, this is the account information I want you to use in order to wire. They've got your lender, they've got maybe your closing attorney, depending on where you live. They've got all this information that they can make an email look very close to what your realtor's email looks like, and then you end up sending it to the wrong place. And we have had that happen. So to prevent these things, I want you to look at this.
Vacationers beware. Credit card scammers are setting up shop where you'd least expect it, from fast food restaurants to gas stations. They aren't actually stealing your card, just making you a target when you hand it over to pay. We've been investigating this story for months, and now one former criminal is switching sides. Here's ABC's Nick Watt for our series Nightline Investigates.
You are watching a brazen breed of credit card thief caught on tape. Miss it? Watch again. This McDonald's drive-thru attendant in Florida is swiping each credit card twice. Once to charge for the food, and again through something called a skimmer, which steals the card's details. Crooks can use that info to clone your card and spend a fortune. This burger stand bandit in Boca Raton got caught, pled guilty, and is on 2 years probation. Police say he was stealing the credit card digits of up to 70 customers every single shift. They came in for a McFlurry and drove away with their bank info fleeced. But here's the thing. These electronic skimmers are now so advanced they don't even need a human to operate. This alleged crook is searching for a skimmer device installed inside a gas pump in Arizona and left. It automatically steals your credit card info if you pay at the pump. This guy caught on camera in a covert sting operation.
He put those in there, and for whatever reason, they're not there anymore. I know why, because I have them.
He's the one who tipped us off to this burgeoning crime, and he's the one who switched out that skimming device for a night vision spy camera.
We may have the first ever video of organized bad guys actually trying to retrieve their skimmers.
That's video gold.
That's where I found mine. It was stuck up here. Unless you're looking like this, you can't see it.
Ahmad Motlag recently found a skimming device inside one of his pumps. Sat there for months. He had no idea.
It looked like a little matchbox, and that's it. It was stuck on one side to the middle.
Skimming all across this country has gotten so bad that Steve Starrance and the United States Secret Service, yep, the same guys who protect the president, they are now on the case.
Are you winning the war?
It's even right now. We're doing our best. We certainly could use more help.
They're getting help from police departments, tip-offs from gas station owners, and just wait until you meet one of their former secret weapons.
Somebody turned my partner in, and he turned me in.
Dan DeFilippi is a reformed credit card hacker who switched sides. He was caught by the Secret Service and then spent 2 years training agents in the dark art of skimming.
So this is the reader that would be inside the gas pump, and so you would just swipe it through, and it would read it right here.
How do they get into those pumps? Believe it or not, there's a universal key that opens most gas pump doors.
And that's kind of scary, right? To know that the universal key can open just about any gas pump from New York to California. And so I show this video to them, and I talk about whether or not they have their down payment protected, right? And then also too, what are they doing at when they go to different places to eat, just their local restaurants. I'm guilty of handing my card to the Chili's, to the person over at Chili's, and not thinking twice about where they're walking away with my card information. So this presentation has how to avoid identity theft, things you can do, of course, monitoring your credit report, adding that two-factor I know it's super inconvenient to have that two-factor authenticity email go out, or it goes to a text, but those are put in place to kind of protect you from that. The other thing is filing an actual report with what that entails, as far as going to the credit bureaus to freeze your accounts. So that's another element. And you shouldn't have to pay for these things. I know that there's a lot of companies out there that will do it for you for a fee each month. But reporting your credit problems are important in terms of, sometimes it's not even that. Indian Health Services might have something that a bill that's been put on there that should have gone to Indian Health Services or whatnot. So, or there's, name problems, right? Individuals with similar or same names. So there's a lot of things you can do to protect your credit, and to also make sure you're protecting that savings, that down payment that they're working on. But now let's talk about mortgages. If there's any questions, I'll keep checking the chat area. I don't see any, but you're welcome to put questions in the chat area. We got to talk about understanding the mortgage process itself, and that starts with a home loan. If you're following along, that's Pathways Home. But the loan officer itself, their job is to make sure that they're evaluating credit, income, assets, employment, all those C's of credit we talked about earlier. The other thing to note is that one person, one borrower might actually qualify for different loans, right? So if you're a Native veteran, then the Native American Direct Loan is the one for you. There are others. Of course, you could go conventional. You could use Section 184. USDA is another one. There are so many different options. The lender helps you evaluate which one is the best for you and your finances. So they'll look at all the options, but they'll also ask you for a lot of documents. So be prepared to get pay stubs, W-2 forms, federal tax returns, at least 2 years, documentation of all your other sources of income, bank statements. I want to go back to something. For my self-employed individuals, these tax returns are going to be huge. They're going to want your tax returns and your business tax returns. Now, of course, when you're a small business, you want to deduct as much as possible and not pay as much in terms of taxes, right? So what does that mean for you when you go to apply for a home loan? Sometimes you won't show that you make enough. So just be careful about that. Think about the timeline. Think about, you know, how you want to purchase a home, and you're gonna need at least 2 years of tax returns. Bank statements. I talked about that a lot. They want to make sure you have your bank statements and you can send it over to them. Of course, there's other documentation like your identity. They're going to need your driver's license or your tribal ID card, social security number, etc. So gather these things now. Make sure you have them all in place, because your borrower is going to ask for it. Your lender is going to ask for it every 2 months, if not, you know, every month, depending on the you know, where you are in the process. And the borrowers get, it's funny how, you know, they're happy to be through this process, but they get annoyed that they have to you turn these things in every month. So you just gotta let them know ahead of time that it's going to happen, and then it's not as bad. Section 184 is the one I'm going to highlight here. Of course, there are others, but Section 184, no income limits. This is huge for communities where, you know, we want to support our service, our fire rescue, our police department, right? Our teachers. So I know that there are other home loans out there, but the fact that it has no income limits is helpful. No credit score, right? So what does that mean? They are looking at your credit history, just not the score, which is something that is helpful for our clients. And the fact that the private mortgage insurance is low. Private mortgage insurance basically means is because it's a loan guarantee product through HUD. The banks have a guarantee that if something were to happen to this particular loan, that it would get repaid, and so you have to pay insurance as a result. Flexible underwriting. This is huge. Typically, underwriting is done by a computer, but to have physically manual underwriting and know that someone is looking at all the specifics within your application is a huge benefit to our clients, because there's a lot of extenuating factors, right? Low down payment, it's only 2.25%, where even FHA's first-time home buyer product is 3.5%, right? So that's a huge savings to our clients, that they don't have to bring as much to the table. And then their debt to income ratio is also higher than the national average. So on a conventional or conforming loan, you're looking at 36% is the average that they would like to see you have your debt. And in this case, it's 41%. And the other thing is that it's based on market rates, so it's competitive. I think I checked yesterday and mortgage rates was at 7. Someone has their phone. I don't want to like go back and forth with the presentation, but you can go ahead and Google today's mortgage rate. I want to say yesterday was 7.06%. And that number has been changing. It changes every day. So it doesn't remain the same. But yeah, if someone wants to put that in the chat area, feel free to do so. Of course, here are the maximum loan limits. That link is available to you if you wanted to know in your area what Section 184 would look like for you. Now, interest. I mentioned that banks are businesses and businesses sell products. Interest is the cost of borrowing money, right? So whether that interest is fixed, adjustable, interest only, or balloon. In the case of our clients, they're always fixed. We don't really talk much about these other three, but know that they are options. You know, if you've got a client that was approached with something that's adjustable, then more than likely it's predatory in nature. Going back to 2008, this is something that people were allowed to do, and you know, technically it's back. People have been using them, and we don't recommend that they do so, because then they don't have that ability to know each month exactly what their mortgage payment will be. So, and I apologize if you can hear the I guess the maintenance out front. They're working on the lawn, and so, or not the lawn, but in my business complex, they're working on the outside. So can't really control that, but How much home can you afford? A lot of people say they come to the class and they're excited about the class, but they want to know, how much house will I get, right? What am I going to get approved for? I don't like giving them that number. Personally, I like them going to the lender for that, because they have to look at their income, their debt to income ratio, down payment, the C's of credit, and there's other things that they have to do as well. So I caution individuals from using the home loan calculators. A lot of times they're not as accurate, and you're going to get solicited by all the many different lenders that are out there. Lenders use what's called qualifying ratios to determine whether or not you can qualify for a home loan. Housing expense ratio is the first one. And that just simply means, when I purchase this home each month, I have a payment. How much of that payment should be dedicated to the house itself, right? So let's look at front end. Client A has a total gross monthly income of $6,800. They have selected a loan product that allows for a 29% maximum housing ratio. If I do the math, 6,800 times 29% or 0.29, I get 1972. So it's essentially saying that's how much of her home loan needs to be dedicated towards the housing payment itself. The other element, and we talked a little bit about debt to income before, is the fact that debt to income, it's not all the debts, right? So a lot of folks think it's your cell phone bill and it's your, it's all the bills that you have, right? That's your debts. In the case of debt to income, it's just what's being reported on your credit report. So that's what the banks look at. So client B, for example, has selected, in this case, it looks like Section 184. And so the maximum amount of debt that they can hold is 41% of their income. So their total gross monthly income is $6,500. When I do the math on that, $6,500 times 41% means that their debts and their housing payment can't exceed $2,665. So you can see here that debt definitely affects affordability. The less debt that he has, the more he can afford to spend on his mortgage payment. So debt to income looks at how much money you owe in comparison to how much you earn. And it's really a good financial picture, right? Go back to that picture model of saying, well, this is what it looks like right now. And remember, it can always get better. It just can't get worse. The lower your debt to income ratio, the more money you have to spend on other things. The more money you have to save. And that feels good to the banks, right? So typically I have them do this. I have them practice using this particular exercise. And then we talk about affordability. I make them be the bank, right? Evaluate someone. So I give them information and I tell them, let's talk about their character, their capacity, their capital, their collateral, the conditions. Like, here are the things that I want them to evaluate. And I make them do that on their own. I also make them evaluate ratios, because when you see what the bank actually looks at in order to approve your home loan, then you have a better understanding of why you're making certain moves when it comes to your bank account, right? You're able to say, okay, I see that my debts are important. I'm not going to put anything else on my credit at this time. I'm going to go ahead and try to pay off as much as I can, because I know that that's going to affect my ratio, right? So allowing them to have that is huge. I'm giving them that information. Any questions about mortgage and the home loan itself? We'll talk about the mortgage payment next, but I wanted to make sure I left room for that. Just checking, no new questions in the chat area. Okay. So land, purchasing a home on or off reservation. So there is the element of, land status and whether or not you're on tribal trust land, allotted lands, or fee simple, right? So I won't go into all the specifics right now, but I do want to make sure that everybody has the basic understanding of the fact that if you're on tribal trust land, then you have to make sure that you're going through your tribal land office, land management. Some people call it tribal realty. Each tribe has their own version of what it looks or sounds like. Make sure you invite them to your classes so that they can talk about the process, the application itself. Oftentimes, you have to go through the land management process in addition to the loan application in order to make sure that things flow and that you can have a timely transition to home ownership. And the reason for that, think about in the case of South Dakota, there's only a certain amount of months that are considered prime building time, right? You can't build in the middle of winter. So it's really important that they're starting the process whenever they need to. Restricted fee lands, fee simple. Fee simple is something that you would see off reservation, and on some tribal trust land, there's fee simple. You know, in a allotted situation, there might be fee simple close by, but essentially, when it's fee simple, it means that the title itself is able to transfer from party to party without that extra level of jurisdiction that the tribe or that the federal government would have, right? So BIA is typically not involved in a fee simple transaction. Then there's allotments, and that also means that the ownership itself is fractionated. There's a lot of people involved in that, and so you have to either get permission from those individuals to sell the property or to purchase the property. It's very, very complicated, but it is something that through the Hearth Act has improved, so that we're not in a situation where individuals, it doesn't take as long now to get this property transferred as far as title and ownership. However, it's important that our clients are aware of the process and that you invite them to the class, because most of us, we are, as housing counselors, we are familiar with the process, but, we're not title companies and we don't do that type of work. Pre-qualification versus pre-approval. I just wanted to remind everyone as to the difference. So pre-qualification means the loan officer is collecting this information and making some estimations. They're doing some information, they're providing some information, but they haven't actually pre-approved you for the loan. Whereas a pre-approval takes the actual information, does a hard pull, verifies the information, and makes sure that you're actually approved for the loan. So in years past, clients could get by with a pre-qualification. The home buying process has become so, I would say the market has made it to where you're a much stronger candidate if you have a pre-approval versus a pre-qualification. It doesn't mean that if you're pre-qualified, you can't go out and look at homes. But I will say that when you're in the process of selecting an offer, a lot of times the pre-approval factor matters. So the cost of buying a home, again, going back to what we're trying to debunk, a lot of people think down payment is the only amount of money that they need for a home, and it's not. There are application fees, loan origination fees, inspection fees, appraisal fees. These are all the other things that could be a part of the transaction. Depending on the market, you can see buyers paying the pretty much the majority of the closing costs. In a seller's market, that's the case, that the buyers are doing that. Now, when it's a buyer's market, the sellers are more inclined to pay some of these costs. But as of right now, it is definitely still a seller's market. So buyers are having to make sure they have at least anywhere between 2.5% to 3%, 3.5%. Points and fees, I do want to mention points just because interest rates are high. So when someone's got enough money saved that they can cover their down payment and their closing costs, well, then maybe they should look at lowering their interest rate by paying points. So that's just another element to that. Some people are always confused. How do I know how much money I have to bring to the table? Well, loan to value is something that the banks use to be able to determine how much will they actually loan you, right? So in the case of this particular person, if the appraised value is 100,000, which that's a very low number, but it's easy math. Loan to value is 90%. The lender will only lend you 90,000. You have to put that additional 10, right? Mortgage payment. What is a mortgage made of? So the elements of a mortgage payment are principal. That's the money that you're borrowing. The interest itself, right? The cost of borrowing the money. The taxes, if you're off reservation, then your local county, city, municipality, they have taxes. And so you're paying for that as well each month. And then insurance. Insurance is non-negotiable. A lot of folks don't understand that whole process, but buying a home is an asset. And so you want to make sure that you're insuring that asset and that it's protected, from fire and damage and liability. So insurance is required by the lender, and it's something that you'll have to have whether you're on or off reservation. So a lot of times with these presentations, I'm going back and forth between housing terms and housing actors. So the terms we talked about so far are debt to income, closing costs, down payment, loan products. But now we'll talk a little bit about inspection and appraisal to kind of end it out, because a lot of folks don't understand the difference between the two. So I won't talk about real estate agents. If you have any questions about realtors or about that representation and the requirements, like what a realtor or a real estate agent is supposed to do, I'm happy to answer it. But I think for the purpose of this conversation, I want to skip over to home inspection. So it's really important that our clients are getting home inspections done. If you're on the reservation, the good thing is that if you have a TDHE and there's an inspector on staff, typically they go out on the client's behalf to inspect the home, or that they can be hired to do so on behalf of our clients. But typically a home inspection costs anywhere between $300 and $500. It can be even more depending on the square footage of the home, but they check the physical condition of the house, major mechanical systems, electrical, plumbing, heating, cooling, construction from roof to foundation. They don't look at carpet and things of that nature. They're not looking at, is this granite or is it Formica? They're not looking at those things. They're looking at the foundations of the home itself and whether or not there are any major systems or issues with those systems. So here's an example of an inspection. And so you can see that he sees some sort of exterior water damage. He's not entirely sure. He says it's deficient. So it's something that maybe you can contact a handyman, or it could be a project that the homeowners could take on for themselves. However, when they got below that particular threshold, they saw that there was actual water intrusion, damage above the band joist. So it recommends that a qualified contractor identify the source of where the moisture's coming in, where the water's coming in, and repair it. And then the recommendation is contact a qualified professional. So from point A to point B, that's a costly repair, right? That is going to cost the homeowner money, the buyer money. The buyer could also ask the seller to repair this item or to provide monies towards repairing this item. However, either way, it was found because of the inspection report. And that is why an inspection is so important. If you're buying an existing home, I know in 2020 when the market was crazy and the interest rates were so low and there were so many people wanting to purchase a home that they were forgoing the inspection, but it's not recommended that they do so. Home appraisals, right? So we'll talk a little bit about the sales comparison approach versus cost approach. If you're on reservation, typically it's going to be the cost approach, right? You don't have that many sales per quarter to compare one home price versus another. In the sale comparison model, essentially as a agent, I can say that I'm looking at, to price a home, I'm looking at, well, what is sold in the last 30, 60, 90 days? How much did it sell for? And then I can say, okay, this is how much you should offer as a result. I'm able to make those decisions based on the amount of homes that are sold in a specific area. If you're not into real estate that much and you're not familiar with what that looks like, a lot of people look at the Zestimate. So Zillow kind of gives you an idea. It's not as accurate as a professional real estate either agent or realtor, but typically that's just how the sales comparison model works, is that they're looking at the property you want to buy versus all the properties that have sold in the area. The cost approach is something we see every day on the reservation because typically you're building that, right? The manufactured home is coming to the site. It's going to be placed on the site. And then so the value itself is how much it costs to build that home. And so here you can see an actual appraisal report. This is one from where I'm from, where you can see there's the subject property, the property I want to buy, 37 Cedar Way. Then there's there's 3 options that recently sold, and then they'll compare them. How many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, how much did it sell for, etc. So these are the kind of things that the professionals are going to be working with our clients to do. But if you include them in this, then they have an understanding of what they're doing, right? That they're not just hand holding. I want to make sure my clients understand what's going to happen in the process, and then they feel more comfortable. to ask questions, because hopefully they'll be able to download this information to their family and their friends, and they get to see that it's not so difficult. So this is, if you remember, the man behind the curtain. There's your lender who knows the personal things about you. Maybe you had to sit down with the lender one-on-one. They're familiar with you in a way that I think is helpful for our clients. However, a lot of folks don't realize they're passing this file on to an underwriter, and the underwriter works for the bank, and the underwriter's main goal is to make sure that this is a sound decision for the bank itself. So they review your information again, and then they issue a decision. Sometimes it's clear to close, meaning everything's been approved, and we can move forward with closing on the property. Sometimes it's conditional closed, right? We see that this home is that your credit is fine. However, we want you to pull the 3 years taxes instead of 2. It completely dependent upon whatever the underwriter has decided. I've seen conditional closing for HOAs, right? They want to make sure that there's no encumbrances on the title. No one else might have an issue. So it just depends. But the loan decision itself, what you want to hear is clear to close, that everything has been evaluated and that you're clear. Sorry, clear to close, but you have conditions. That means you have to satisfy those conditions. I have had it happen where clients are, so the I guess the process itself can be nerve-wracking, that they don't necessarily connect with their lender, and they don't provide this in a timely manner. And you have to understand that the closing process itself, it's almost there's like that checkerboard pattern where there's all these conditions that have to be met. And so when you get to a point where you're clear to close, there are a couple things you want to make sure you're steering clear of. The closing disclosure helps in that it tells you exactly what elements you need to be aware of. Your loan amount, your interest rate, your monthly principal and interest. It will calculate the number of years it'll take you to complete or satisfy the loan requirement itself, right? So the closing disclosure is huge. However, it has to be issued 3 days before closing. Going back to 2008, remember I said a lot of things came from there. One of the most important things that came from 2008 was the fact that buyers need to have 3 days with this document, or you can't close. So it's really important that our clients understand the loan estimate and the closing disclosure, because this is where it's going to have the information. A lot of times at the closing disclosure point, they're going to lock the interest rate. So whatever today's rate is, they're going to lock it for today. What about this? We had it clear to close, and you went and applied for a Kohl's credit card just to save 20% on a $50 purchase, right? These things happen. People don't close because they've issued more credit. That changes your debt to income. That changes your affordability. So we want to make sure people understand the connection between all these things we've talked about today, right? You've got your credit and that financial picture that they took in the beginning. It can always improve, but it can't get worse. So if you do open a credit card, now your debt to income may change, right? And if it changes for the better, great. If it changes for the worse, you might have a problem and you're not able to close on time. Guides to closing on time: avoiding new applications, keeping all lines of communication open with your lender, huge. A lot of times, again, people are scared to talk to their lender, even the ones that have been with them through the process, and they had a good relationship, but now here we are getting close to closing and they're getting scared. So you as the counselor, make sure that you're in communication with both the lender and with the client. Avoid making late payments. I asked folks if they can set things up automatically so that the money's in the account and that things can get paid on time. I appreciate that. Shopping for new furniture. I know they're excited. They're about to buy a new home, but furniture and large purchases are 90% of the problem, because now they're going and purchasing and new items. And if they do it on a credit card, then that's going to change their debt to income. Avoid irregular deposits or withdrawals from funds from bank accounts. This one's a big one. So going back to 2008, the bank wants to know where the money came from and how long it's been there. So there's this concept of sourced, I know where the money came from, and seasoned, I know how long it's been there. There was a lot of funny money infused in the economy when things went south. And so it's really important that our clients know they can't borrow money to make up their down payment. That irregular deposits will get questioned by the underwriter, right? So of course their regular pay each week, if they have direct deposit, that's fine. But it's, if you're transferring tens of thousands of dollars between accounts, that's going to come up. Venmo, PayPal, those types of things, it will come up. And lastly, avoid quitting. A lot of folks say, after I buy this house, I'm quitting this job, right? Think about it from the perspective of the bank. We talked about employment and the fact that your employment is a part of that conditions to close, right? If I have had lenders call the day of to verify employment. So you have to make sure that you don't put the seeds of doubt in your employer's mind that you're quitting. Any questions so far? Feel free to put those in the chat area. We're getting real close to the end here. But the closing itself is just means that it's settled, right? That the transfer of ownership has taken place. So what's happening after you close? Well, you're going to review all the loan documents and sign those, exchange any monies that need to be exchanged. Typically, that doesn't happen between you. Remember, I said it's a wire transfer thing, and then there's a disbursement of the funds. And then if you're off reservation, it's recorded with your county, and you receive what's called the deed, a couple weeks later from the county. And then that's it. Congrats on your new home. And the same is true on reservation. You'll have a closing. The bank will settle the documents with you. And then, of course, it'll be recorded. But that's pretty much the process of closing a home loan. You do have to protect the investment. And so the last thing I'm going to mention real quick is the fact that insurance itself is required, both on the property, and it protects the contents of the property, the physical structure itself. It's not going to be 100%, but anywhere between 40 to 60% of the value of the home. Liability. If something were to happen to someone on your property, it protects you as well. Medical payment coverage, etc. So insurance is a big one. Flood insurance is a little different. You have to go through the market for that. So you got to go to floodsmart.gov, if you're in that bracket. But that will come out long before. Typically, when you get 3 weeks out from closing, a month out from closing, they start to ask you if you have an insurance agent. And, if you already have one working with your clients, great. But, I always give them 3 options and let them choose what works best for them. I also tell them to go around their house and look at what they have, write down the numbers, the price that they paid. There's apps that do this as well, but they want to know that these things are safe. Documents, home improvement plans, maintenance documents, insurance, all of this important stuff. When you're renting, sometimes you take for granted, documents, right? And protecting documents. Whereas when you're a homeowner, you need to make sure you have these things readily available. So I do think that being prepared is important, and having a maintenance schedule is important. We're going from maybe the TDHE or, a property management company doing all the work for them. And as a homeowner, going back to protecting that budget, there are things they're going to have to do on their own, whether that's repairing their, the HVAC system, right? Or maybe there's some sort of issue with the water heater, or, these things happen in a home, but they are now responsible for it. So, selecting a professional is another thing. What requires a handyman versus what requires a specialist? These are the kind of things that you can talk about with your clients to make sure they're familiar with that. And so with that, I know I have a few minutes to talk about the rest of the home buying process, but I know it's 3:28 and I want to be respectful of your time. If you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat area. I'm still here and able to respond. Let me stop share. Any questions?
Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and close out. For those of you who do have any questions, please go ahead and type them in the chat box. Marie will be able to answer them. I'm going to go ahead and launch the survey for everybody. The survey helps out Marie know what topics, what you would like to be discussed. Please feel free to fill out and let us know exactly what you think. It does help us. Our next webinar is going to be May 31st. It is going to be Recession Proof Your Small Business, presented by Russ Siegel, Executive Director of the Sequoia Fund Incorporated. As always, registration is free. 2 p.m. It will be at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central, 12 p.m. Mountain, and 11 a.m. Pacific. Feel free to access this and any other recorded webinars online on our website at www.nativelearningcenter.com. We have a Cathedra Webinars tab and a recorded webinars section. You can click on any one of the webinars that we have done for the past 18 months. Feel free to view them and share them with your friends and colleagues. Check out our upcoming events as well on our social media sites such as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. We even have a podcast titled Hope a Thing, a Native American Podcast. You can find that on Simplecast, Google Podcast, Spotify, and Apple Podcast. Once again, thank you everybody for joining us today, and thank you so much, Marie. Once again, an amazing webinar. We truly appreciate you. And I see somebody has asked, yes, you will be able to rewatch. It is recorded. It will be posted onto our website tomorrow morning. We do have a Cathedra's webinar tab. If you just click that and go to recorded webinars, you'll be able to see all the recorded webinars we have done for the past 2 years.
And to answer your question, one, thank you all for being here today. And to answer the question in regards to a longer training. So I do know this process, both on the reservation and off. There's so many other things to talk about. June is home ownership month. And so that's a great opportunity for you all to provide information to your clients and put that content out there. I will have several other webinars in the month of June, encompassing home ownership in different areas. How do you sell a home, right? This is about generational wealth and, when's a good time to sell a home, or how do I go about selling a home? So we will have a discussion on Section 184 and some of these other elements to home ownership in the coming month. But thank you. I appreciate the positive feedback. And again, if you have any other questions, you can put them in the chat area. I'll be here for a little longer.
Thank you, Marie.